Our Battalion XO was pretty toxic. He did a lot of public humiliation. I remember at one point I pulled him outside and I asked him, if he wants to yell at me and chew me out, that's fine, but bring me outside and let's do this, one-on-one. Started having a lot of internal anger and frustration and not being able to control that. And I continue my, care with behavioral health, through the VA to ensure that I'm able to address my issues of depression and PTSD and so forth.
Hi, and welcome to Veterans Corner. I'm George Hinestrosa, an Air Force and Army retired veteran of 25 years and a business owner for 9 years. Here on the show, we explore how military experience transforms into business success. Each episode features veterans who've built thriving businesses, sharing strategies that turn military training into entrepreneurial advantage. The mission is to inspire and equip transitioning service members with practical knowledge and real-world insights from veterans who've built their businesses in many different industries. And today's guest is David Price. Welcome to Veterans Corner, David.
Hey, thanks for having me, George. I really appreciate it.
It's an honor, sir. Picture this. It's Baghdad, 2016, in Iraq. The city is still reeling from years of conflict. In the heart of the U.S. Embassy, surrounded by concrete barriers and heightened security, one man is managing something most people have never heard of. 27 foreign military sales cases worth millions of dollars, bridging the gap between the United States government, the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, and defense contractors from around the world. That man is my guest today, David Price. But here's what makes David's story truly remarkable. That deployment to Baghdad wasn't the beginning of his journey, and it certainly wasn't the end. It was just one chapter in a 24-year career that spans from leading soldiers in combat as a U.S. Army officer to testing cutting-edge defense technology at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, to running his own consulting firm that helps defense companies navigate one of the most complex and misunderstood processes in government contracting. David has commanded troops, managed networks for thousands of soldiers, stood in the halls of the Pentagon, and now sits in the CEO chair of 4690 Solutions, a company built on one simple premise: foreign military sales doesn't have to be an impenetrable maze. Again, David, thank you for being with us today. And before we get into it, if you kindly share a little bit about, what prompted you to, first of all, join the military in the first place as a young man?
Yeah, sure. I joined the military, because I come from a military family. My father, served in the United States Air Force from 1960 until 1979, when he retired. Or I guess he entered in 1959. He did his 20 years. But he did multiple tours in the Far East in support of Vietnam. He ran maintenance programs for fighter aircraft like the F-16s and F-4s and stuff like that during his time in the Air Force. My older brother, he joined the Air Force, and then when he got out of the Air Force, he switched over to the Army National Guard and Army Reserves. And so, as I was, coming up, I had a lot of understanding of the military as a military brat, and I elected to take my turn, and I enlisted in the Army, did 4 years, then I went to officer candidate school and got my commission and finished off my career that way.
Did you use a green to gold? Was that a green to gold plan that you did, or was just you just got out, went to school and came back in?
No, actually, with officer candidate school, you apply for it, and then you stay on active duty the entire time, and, you just go to Fort Benning, Georgia, or, I think it's 14 weeks to go through the officer candidate school there, and then you come out as a second lieutenant, and you're automatically, remain on active duty by going that route. So I didn't have to go to ROTC or anything like that because I already had I had over 90 credit hours, so I just
Mhm.
had to finish my degree, as as a second lieutenant or first lieutenant, or before I made captain. Um, but um, but yeah, I got to go to Fort Benning for 14 weeks and learn how to be an officer.
Yeah. Well, I remember Benning very well because that's where I went to jump school. So, and jump master school. So yeah, interesting place, Benning, definitely for the hardcore. Um, David, tell us. So, during your military career, after you became an officer, what exactly would you say as you were deployed? What challenges do you feel that may have shaped you into the person you are today? Is there anything that stands out? Were you like most of us or most people that deploy to difficult areas like that, perplexed? And how hard was that for a young man? How old were you at that time?
I was about 28 years old. I joined the military late. I didn't enlist until I was 24. I tried my time, out in the civilian sector for a little bit, and I decided to join a little late. So I was probably about 28, 29 when I got my commission. I was probably right around 30 when I deployed for the first time. But I will tell you the Army in general, and especially being on deployments, what it taught is how to make decisions and how to, resolve complex and wicked problems in a very quick manner. And the other thing is the Army teaches us how to, multitask and manage, lots of different tasks and projects all at the same time. It's amazing to me when I interact with some of my peer civilian counterparts. They, their idea of multitasking and truly, being able to, work multiple projects all at the same time is a little different definition than mine. And I really, you know, I applaud the Army for teaching me how to do that because it makes me a better person now in the current position I have.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: were you a young man married at that time, or did you marry later? Or did you have that? Obviously, if you're married, you're always thinking about family and things like that, and that's an extra weight on a soldier's back that he has to kind of ignore while he's deployed, but not really, right?
Yeah, at the time when I enlisted, I had my wife and two children. And then while I was in the military, we had our third. So yeah, my wife and I got married at a young age. She was 18 and I was 20. We had two children pretty early because, as I said, I already had two children when I enlisted in when I was 24. So, yeah, I brought a family into this. And,
Mm.
my wife wasn't very experienced with the military. So, I had to help bring her along. And for the first 2 years, I was in basic training, AIT, and then straight to Korea for an unaccompanied tour. So her introduction to the Army wasn't exactly a positive one, but
Yeah.
then we got to stay together, except when I was deployed or in training, and she got to see a lot of the benefits of being in the military.
Yeah, I guess once you became an officer, you understood the why commanders stress the family readiness program and why that program exists. I don't know if back then or how useful it was at that time, but I know that they really stress that a lot,
Absolutely,
keeping the families together, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. So, David, so just moving on then, what can you tell us? Like, was there a challenging moment when you were deployed? Was there anything, maybe even maybe an abrasive moment with leadership or just being in that area? Just the stress of just being like multitasking, like you mentioned, always being on the go and on the alert. Can you? How much of that affected you? What happened? And maybe has that helped shape who you are today?
Absolutely. So during my first deployment, I was a young captain. I was assigned to a combat unit, with infantry and armor. And instead of I'm a signal officer. So instead of being, a battalion S6 and running the communications for the battalion, they made me a battle captain to where I was in charge of running the tactical operations center for the battalion. I worked a 12-hour shift, and then there was another captain that worked the other 12-hour shift. Our battalion XO was pretty toxic. He did a lot of public humiliation. I remember at one point I pulled him outside. I asked to speak to him, and I asked him, to please, if he wants to yell at me and chew me out, that's fine, but bring me outside and let's do this, one on one. But respectfully, I don't think he should be doing it while in front of the soldiers that I'm supposed to be leading, and trying to humiliate me. He told me that I was whining, that I needed to just do my job. So I will tell you, during that time period, it was a very tough time because I wasn't able to look at what he was trying to teach because his toxic, mentality really prevented me from learning it. But I will tell you that upon reflection, much later on, while I didn't appreciate the toxicity, and he could have done it a lot better, when I started looking at what he was trying to teach about army operations and those things, his teaching started to shape how I became a senior officer and how I approached how army operations work and how to work with different levels of staff. But I had to get separated from the toxicity and then really start to analyze what was it he was trying to do, even though he did it in a very poor manner, in my opinion.
Yeah. I kind of like the drill sergeant in the movie, right? What was that movie again? I forget now, but just completely humiliate everyone until they learn to become a Marine.
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's funny how those things turn out. Lessons learned after the fact, even though it's a rough ride. Believe it or not, lessons are learned from that type of an environment. Just even if it's only to create a little bit of a thicker skin, right? Just to be able to withstand things like that in the future, right? So I mean, all has its pros and cons. So David, so was that just one of them, or did you have several episodes like that, or not necessarily with leadership, but just other challenges, maybe in the army, just being away from family, anything else, and how did you deal with that, um, if any, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As I got to the end of my career, I started to realize that you know, through lots of different things that happen to all of us as soldiers or Marines or airmen, there's a lot of things that happen to us, and we react to it in different ways. Not to mention we all enter into service with different levels of baggage from our childhood or from early adulthood, whatever it may be. And I realized, because of some things that I was feeling and some reactions that I was having, I started having a lot of internal anger and frustration and not being able to control that. I made the decision to go ahead and while I was still on active duty as a lieutenant colonel, to self-refer myself to behavior health. And my chain of command never knew that I did that. I did it on my own. When I went to appointments, they just knew I had a medical appointment and so forth. But the bottom line is I went ahead and went to behavior health, and I got the treatment that I needed. The behavior health where I was at Fort Huachuca really took care of me, and it led me to now where I'm at on as post military, where now that care has been transferred to the VA hospital, and I continue my, care with behavior health, through the VA to ensure that I'm able to address my issues of depression and PTSD and so forth. So, for me, taking that route, was a very good decision for me. And anyone that is thinking about it, I would, definitely recommend, getting the help that they need, because it was extremely beneficial for me and leading me to where I am today.
Right, right. So let me ask you, Dave. So so you said towards the end of your career. So how soon before you got out did you start doing that? Because, now that we're talking about that, and this is great, this is exactly what we need to talk about. How close to transitioning were you, or in your mind when you started? Were you planning on transitioning? Let me do this, or did you just start doing it because you knew it was the right thing to do?
I started doing it because I knew it was the right thing to do, and I needed to do something to, ensure that I was taking care of me and taking care of my relationships. Because not only was I starting to, damage myself, but I was starting to damage my relationships, and I knew I needed to do something. And so I think I started my treatment in 2017. I ultimately retired in April of 2019, but I didn't make that decision to retire until, literally a year before I retired. Just I was, pending some there was some stuff going on in the army and stuff, and it was just they always ask, "Hey, so, how long are you gonna stay in?" And I would always say, "I'm gonna stay in as long as I'm having fun." And somewhere around the 21.5 year mark, 22-year mark, I just got the feeling that it was time for me to retire. It wasn't as fun as it used to be, but, we all have things that we might disagree with, how things are going in the army. It's not like it was in the old days. And I
Right,
mean,
right.
I heard my dad talk all the time about how, the military that I'm in wasn't the same military he was. They had a disagreement, they'd go out back and whoever walked back in was right. And he would joke around with me about all of that stuff. And, now I'm the old guy that's talking about, well, it's not like it used to be, and stuff. But
Yeah.
the bottom line is I self-referred myself because I knew I needed to do it, and, I wasn't thinking about what was gonna happen after the army in terms of my mental health, and so, that was just something I just felt like I needed to do.
So, David, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I think we all go through some of that in some way, shape, or form. I went through something similar, right? Um, but yeah, everything was for the best. And some people, I mean, 25 years was a long time for me. I maybe I would have stayed in a little longer, but as you said, sometimes you just feel something, little voice inside saying, it's probably time for me to, I think I've given what I can, and I don't want to let anybody down, right? So you just make the decision, and that's great. That's responsibility. That's called responsibility. Um, so Dave, so as you are transitioning now, and you are preparing to go out into what some people call the real world, whatever that is. Um, what was going through your mind, during those last 6 months, let's say, as you were thinking, "Okay, now I'm gonna get out. I've got a family of 3, and I'm not really," maybe were you sure what you were gonna do? Were you using some of the TAPS resources, some of the programs that are available to us as we're getting out? What exactly was going through your mind, let's say, during the last 6 months of your you know
Absolutely. I will tell you is I was fortunate. You mentioned in the awesome introduction made me sound better than I could ever imagine. So thank you for that introduction. But you know, while I was in Baghdad and working foreign military sales, I didn't know what foreign military sales really was until I got that assignment. And that along with, I'd worked a lot of contracting in my last set of assignments, and so when it came time to leave, I reached out to the people that I worked with in back here in the United States that handles foreign military sales on the government side. And I reached out to him. I'm like, "Look, hey, I'm retiring in 12 months. Would you all, be interested in trying to bring me on?" And I ultimately ended up being a government contractor, for that organization for about 5 years. But I got that position because of the networking that I had done by taking this Y-ass tasker that I was told I had to go to do an augmentation assignment for 1 year, and I happened to take the embassy one, and it worked out really good for me, and now here I am. I mean, you never know. Again, I thank the Army because the Army's, provided me the training and the expertise that I've needed to provide me the capabilities that I can provide to companies now, and the Army really led me in that. So, again, I it's just we continue to serve, but we just serve in different ways even after our careers are over in the military, and that's what I'm trying to do. But the other part is I wanna answer is as you go into the last 6 months especially is I was really focused on medical, because I didn't the Army doesn't do a real good job of teaching us about how the VA works, what's gonna happen when you get out, and all those type of things. So I spent a lot of time in my last 12 months trying to research, how does the VA work? What do I need to do to set myself up for success? I think we all play the game when we're on active duty. We're hurting, but we don't want to admit it. We don't want to go to sick call. We don't want to get a profile because that'll prevent us from getting promoted. That'll prevent us from getting some assignment or going to some school or something. And so we just deal with the pain and we don't do anything about it. But the problem is at some point you've got to get that all the stuff that's going on in your medical records. So what really happened during your career is service, connected. So I spent a lot of time making sure everything was documented, especially once I made the decision to get out. So that way, when I went through the VA physical and so forth, then I was, granted, a higher percentage than I probably otherwise would have been for my disability. So, but you have to do the work before you get out because after you get out, it's much harder to convince the VA that what's going on is service connected.
Yes, and those are to all those listening, those are words of wisdom. Make sure you take care of yourself, right? We are taking care of the nation, but we have to take care of ourselves because down the line, guess what? It's just you and you. So, David, so now the entrepreneurship. So you got out and did you start working for someone? Because you have a lot. I mean, we could have just spent an hour just introducing you, because you have a lot of, you've done a lot of things and obviously all related to each other. You've maintained that string of expertise. But as you got out, was it? Was it an entrepreneurial bug that you had? Was it you just wanted to? Did you start working for a few companies and then finally decide, hey, I'm going to work for myself? Or, how did now that we're getting out of the service, how did all of this fall into place? How did your post career military career start to shape its way?
Absolutely. So, as I got out of the military, I went to go work as a government contractor directly for the Army's Communication Electronics Command, supporting their Security Assistance Management Directorate. So, I went to go work for a company called Bowhead that, was the government contract that provided system engineering and, assistance to the government civilians at that organization. And so for 5 years, that's what I did, and I never thought about, doing what I'm doing now, which is, now I have my own company and doing the consulting. But as with everything, you move along in a job or like I did in the Army, it was like I got to the just after the 5-year mark, and, there was some changes going on that I just I felt like that I needed to do something else. And so I made the decision to leave the government contract job, and my wife and I started talking about, okay, so what comes next, and do I start looking for other employment or whatever, and we both simultaneously decided to open this company up. On her side, she does accounting and she has her own clients where she provides accounting services. And on my side, I do this with foreign military sales, contracting, and project management and stuff. So the bottom line is we just decided together that, instead of, working for somebody and so forth, that it would be better if we went ahead and and took our expertise out on our own, because she's got 30 years of doing accounting and I've got my experience, and so we decided to open up this company and do what we do today.
So, would you say that you work mostly with civilians now, or ex-military contractors, or I mean, mostly who do you represent as your consulting, and and just to be tie that in, do you feel like your veteran status or your prior military experience, do you bring that into your current civilian now business? How does that, how do you bring that identity, or how you mix that into what you do now, or not at all, or?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I understand the question. So I will tell you I absolutely do bring in my prior military experience, and that gives me credibility with the companies that I am working for.
Mm,
The companies I work for are, they vary. They're mostly all defense industry type
mm,
companies. For the most part, they're small or medium size. There's a couple of exceptions, but most of them are small and medium sized that, you know, are either providing, pure defense articles or what's called dual use items, which is something that can be sold commercially or, to the defense industry. But the bottom line is these companies are looking to expand their international sales, but they need to figure out how to do foreign military sales and direct commercial sales, and that's where, I come in to provide them that assistance. And then I not only interacting with them, but then on their behalf, depending on how they want me to different clients want me to do different things, I will interact with, the US, Department of Defense organizations or personnel in the embassies and the US military groups that are in the embassies on their behalf to try to help, move FMS cases along and help develop cases, for my clients if I can.
So David, so we're almost on the 30-minute mark, and I just wanted to, I don't want to leave out some of the more, again, going back to the veterans transitioning. Thank you for sharing that, and you have, I thank you, because it really, in a way, you're continuing to serve, in that capacity. Um, so how does David Price find time for for himself in the middle of now post military, and now doing your own business? How does David spend time with the family? What do you do to keep yourself sane in this, what we call the real world, right? How do you, are you a spiritual person? Do you feel like, do you watch your diet? I mean, people do many different things. They meditate. What are some of the things? Are you an early riser? Uh, what things maybe you want to share, maybe that has have helped you post military, and throughout those little hops, and those little times where you spent with other companies, but now that you're in your own company and kind of in control of your own time, how do you use that time to maintain yourself, your sanity, your focus?
Yeah, so for me, my sanity and my focus comes from my family. I am fortunate that, I have 3 children. I have 2 granddaughters. My oldest, my daughter with my granddaughters lives less than 5 minutes from my house. My, oldest son lives about 10 minutes from my house. I have one son that's decided to stay off in Arizona, but we bring him out here for, different events, and I'm still trying to talk him to move to Texas where I'm at. Eventually, I hope to win that fight and get him to move here. But, the bottom line is, my sanity and my stuff comes from spending time with my family. And anytime I can get to spend with my granddaughters is just, tremendous. If it's going to watch a T-ball game or go watch a dance recital, whatever it is, I just or we'll have, sleepovers where both our granddaughters come over here and they spend the day and the night with, my wife and I. Those are, tremendous, opportunities. And then, on a day-to-day basis, it's my relationship with my wife. Um, the military I figured it out once in a 23-year career. I probably spent about 9.5 years away from home,
Wow.
and with deployments and training and all of that stuff, it takes a toll. And so, now is payback time for my wife. Because I'm in this position, I do work hard when I work, but I also am afforded the time. Both of us work from home. So, her office is around the corner in our house. And so, we can spend time together, when we need to. But the main thing is both of us is when we're done for the day, our offices, because we have offices in our house, those doors are shut and we are no longer worried about work or anything. We're focused on, our family time and doing what we love to do.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Dave. So, just to wrap things up, David. So, if you had, as a officer, obviously you said lieutenant colonel, right? What you
Yes, sir.
retired as?
Yes, sir.
Oh, and you probably were a battalion commander or something at some point in your career. But um, what advice or what tidbit of information would you give now in retrospect, in hindsight, if you were in a room full of 100 transitioning service members, um, you had 5 minutes to talk to them. I mean, what are some of the things that from the heart you would really emphasize? Like these are some of the things that, as an individual, this is what I would recommend. Right, other than the work and getting a job and all this other stuff. What things that truly you feel would impact a person's life, you know, could you maybe speak to or maybe share from the heart? Just
Yeah, yeah.
as long.
So I would the two things really is as you're transitioning, again, you've got to take care of yourself medically. We're Just on a personal note, we're talking to my oldest kids, and again, they're all adults. My oldest is like 33 and they go down to 25 and we're talking to them like, "Hey, my especially my daughter, she's 33, she's like complaining about her knees or whatever hurting." And I'm like, "Okay, we'll just wait until you're, 50, 55 because all those aches get a whole lot worse." All right. And so again, medically, when we as soldiers get out at whatever time frame, you get out after your 4 years or you go all the way to retirement, you've got certain pains or something like that based on the training that, I mean, we do hard stuff in the army, and there's a high risk of creating issues. And the bottom line is any pains and aches or issues that you have at 20, 30, or even 40, they're only going to get worse at 50, 60, and 70. And so, again, medically, you need to think about how are you going to make sure that you can transition your medical care from the military treatment facility to a VA situation. Okay. Personally, for me, I've dealt with the VA in Southern Arizona, and now I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I have the VA here in Dallas, Texas, Dallas Fort Worth. And I will tell you, both of those locations for me have been outstanding. All the horror stories about VA and all that stuff, I haven't seen it. Right? I get all the care I need from the VA. Matter of fact, instead of having to go to the VA hospital, just down the road, I've got a VA clinic. That's where I go to for my primary care for the VA. And so, I mean, it's wonderful as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure there are bad places, and there's always those things. But for me, I've had good success. But the work I did to transition, really helped me when I started dealing with post military service medical care with the VA. So there's that. And the second thing is don't shortchange the resume training that the tap teaches you, because it's extremely important. How do you transition, or how do you communicate to civilians what you did in the military? First of all, is I think everybody that serves in the military, and I will definitely say anywhere from sergeant all the way up to the highest general, project management, program management is something that is a good thing to look at, because everything we do, every operation we do is about having to manage a project. No matter what level you're at, it's a project. But if you try to, you gotta figure out how to translate whatever it is you did in the Army or the Marine Corps or Navy or Air Force You have to be able to transition that to language that the civilian sector will look at and go, "That's the person I want," you know? And so, how do you convey what you did in the military to the civilians? And I will tell you, if you look at my resume, it's not perfect. I'm still messing with it. I'm still tweaking it. I'm still trying to adjust it and change it. You know, so it is but what you learn in TAP is the foundation for that, and then you just keep plugging away at it to get the right language and documenting the skills on your resume so you can get the jobs that you're looking for and you're, you know, competitive, because the civilians will understand what you actually did in the military because you'll put it in language that they understand.
Right. Right, and I guess your meaning, right, rather than filling out like a NCOER bullets or OER bullets, right, that you would do on the form, try to visualize, okay, what mission was I on, you know, what did that entail, you know, how much leadership, how much organization, how much project management, how much, you know, I can do this myself or I'm responsible enough to handle things like that on a higher magnitude of intellectual, right? 100% intellectual, rather than just little bullet points of, you know, I lifted this thing and put it over here or whatever, you know. Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Dave. Uh, so again, so I appreciate you being on the show, David. Thank you for your insight again. Your experience is vast, and I only covered a little bit of it in the intro. But people will be able to reach out to you once the video is edited. Um, and just before we go, so that wraps up today's episode of Veterans Corner. A huge thank you to David Price for sharing his journey. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Join the conversation by sharing your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay strong, and remember, you're never alone. Thank you again, David. God bless you. And here's a little for the rest of the day. Yes, sir.